The light within the grand conclave chamber of Cathar Prime was a living entity, a flowing, crystalline substance that ebbed and pulsed with the collective emotional state of the assembled High Counselors. For cycles, it had remained a turbulent, agitated crimson, casting sharp, predatory shadows against the obsidian walls that rose into an UNSEEN Chinese letter. At the heart of this cavernous space, a gravitic disk of polished neutronium held the delegates, each seated upon a throne of personalized, psychoreactive metal that mirrored the inner turmoil of its occupant. The air itself, a carefully calibrated mixture of inert gases and trace psychic catalysts, felt heavy, vibrating with unspoken anxieties and the low, subharmonic hum of the chamber's ancient power core. Silence, a rare and dreaded commodity in Cathar politics, had reigned for an uncomfortably long duration. It was the silence of profound uncertainty, a vacuum of consensus that threatened to collapse into ideological violence. High Counselor Vorlag of the Vexian Ascendancy broke it first. His throne of jagged, crystalline iron shifted, emitting a low groan of stressed material. His voice, a cascade of resonant frequencies that translated imperfectly into the chamber's universal medium, was laced with the cold precision of a striking predator. The observation period has extended beyond all established protocols. The anomaly in the Sol system remains quiescent. This inaction is, in itself, an action. A deliberate statement of defiance or an exhibition of unfathomable ignorance. Neither is acceptable. His multifaceted eyes, 1,000 tiny lenses of polished obsidian, swept across the assembly, lingering on those he knew to be his rivals. Their world teems with chaotic, barely controlled energy signatures. Their technological advancement has followed a trajectory that defies all known models of sentient development, a jagged, explosive line of progress followed by periods of baffling introspection and self-inflicted crisis. And yet, they have not reached for the stars. They possess the means to break their orbital cradle, to send meaningful signals, to announce their presence to the galaxy that watches them with 1,000 unseen eyes. They do not. Across the disk, Matriarch Ilthani of the Signian Veil stirred. Her form was a graceful, flowing confluence of bioluminescent membranes and psionically supported limbs, her throne a smooth, pearlescent cradle. Her voice was like the chiming of celestial glass, a sound that belied the immense gravity of her political influence. Defiance, Counselor Vorlag! How can a species be defiant of a presence they do not know exists? We have shielded our observations behind nth-dimensional curtains. Our sensor nets are woven from the very fabric of spacetime, undetectable by any technology they have yet displayed. Perhaps they are simply young, unaware, content in their cradle. Her tone was placid, a calming balm against Vorlag's abrasive certainty, but her inner thoughts, which subtly colored the light around her throne with shifting hues of lavender and gray, spoke of a deeper unease. She, too, found the silence of the species called humanity to be profoundly unnatural. Every species the Conclave had encountered, upon reaching the threshold of interstellar capability, had screamed its existence into the void, a cry of triumph, of fear, of loneliness. The silence from Sol was a void in the grand galactic chorus, a missing note that made the entire symphony feel discordant and wrong. A third voice, deeper and more ancient, emerged from the shadows at the chamber's edge. It belonged to the speaker for the Eldridge Compact, a being whose physical form was a mere conduit for a collective consciousness that had witnessed the birth of stars. The speaker's throne was a simple, unadorned pillar of stone, seeming to absorb the light around it. "Contentment is not the word I would use, matriarch," the speaker's voice echoed, a chorus of 1,000 synchronized thoughts given singular form. "We have analyzed their global information network, the primitive but vast web of data they call their own. It is not a network of contentment. It is a storm of conflicting ideologies, of self-congratulation and self-loathing, of immense compassion and breathtaking cruelty. They are a species at war with its own nature. They build monuments to peace with one hand and forge weapons of planetary annihilation with the other. They compose symphonies that can fracture a soul with their beauty and then engage in acts of tribal barbarism that would shame a primal scavenger. This is the source of their silence. They are not looking at the stars because they are too consumed by looking at themselves." Vorlag's mandibles clicked in a gesture of Vexian contempt. A species of navel gazers, then, a philosophical contagion waiting to happen. They are unstable. Their energy outputs fluctuate wildly, mirroring their internal chaos. We have seen their world burn from their own atomic fire and then miraculously seen them rebuild. They are a paradox, and paradoxes are liabilities to the carefully structured order we have maintained for millennia. I propose we accelerate the final protocol, a managed uplift, a guided integration. We will impose the stability they so clearly lack. We will give their chaotic energies purpose, our purpose, before they tear their own system apart and potentially threaten their neighbors. The light around his throne flared a deep, bloody crimson, a raw projection of his imperialistic ambition. The Vexian ascendancy had always believed that the only true peace was the peace of absolute control. Matriarch Ilthani's membranes rippled with agitation. Impose? You speak of enslavement, Vorlag. You would break them before we even understand what they are. Have you forgotten the lessons of the Genath catastrophe? An entire star cluster rendered uninhabitable because the Conclave, in its arrogance, presumed to guide a species whose psychological framework was beyond its comprehension. The Genath did not fight us with warships. They fought us with logic bombs, with philosophical weapons that turned our own command structures against themselves. We cannot risk a repeat of such a failure. The air grew colder as she projected her deep-seated fear of that historical shame. The memory of 1,000 worlds silenced not by energy weapons, but by an idea, was a scar on the Conclave's soul. It was then that the chamber's central spire, a column of pure, solidified light that served as the primary data conduit for the Conclave's vast sensor network, began to pulse. A low, resonant chime echoed through the hall, a sound reserved for alerts of the highest priority. Every delegate froze. The light in the room shifted from the emotional crimson of debate to a sterile, analytical blue. Holographic displays bloomed in the air before each throne, shimmering into existence with terrifying speed and clarity. They showed not the Sol system, but the outer markers of the Cathar border in the Perseus arm. A sensor trace, faint but unmistakable. An energy signature that did not match any known vessel in the Conclave's extensive databases. Vorlag leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes scanning the data streams. Unidentified vessel, high-energy readings. It moves with a purpose that suggests it is not a random drifter or a lost trader. He manipulated the display with a flick of his clawed appendage, magnifying the signature. It is on a direct trajectory for the Sol system. A wave of collective shock rippled through the chamber. The light flickered, a reflection of 1,000 minds processing the same impossible data. The speaker's voice cut through the burgeoning panic. The vessel's energy profile, it is broadcasting a carrier wave of immense power, but it contains no message. It is a declaration of presence, aggressive, predatory. Matriarch Ilthani's form seemed to shrink, her bioluminescence dimming. Why? Why would a previously unknown actor travel across uncharted space with such clear intent towards a system that holds no strategic value? A system whose primary inhabitants are a pre-interstellar, uncontacted species? Her question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. The galaxy was ancient and filled with horrors. There were predators in the dark between the stars, entities that the Conclave had spent eons containing or destroying. Rogue fleets, sentient plagues, reality-bending constructs left over from forgotten wars. It does not matter why. Vorlag's voice was a low growl, his earlier ambition now replaced with the cold focus of a military commander. It is a threat. It is moving towards a system under our observation, a system that is, by extension, under our protection whether its inhabitants know it or not. We cannot allow an unknown, hostile force to interact with that volatile species. The potential for catastrophe is immeasurable. If this vessel is hostile, it could arm the humans, manipulate them, or simply obliterate them, creating a power vacuum or a martyr cause that could destabilize this entire sector. If the humans are, as you suggest, speaker, a species of profound internal conflict, imagine what they would do with technology from a truly malevolent power. The central spire chimed again, this time with a note of dire urgency. The holographic displays sharpened, resolving the sensor ghost into a clearer image. The ship was a nightmare-given form. It was not a creation of elegant lines or functional design. It was a jagged shard of darkness, a kilometers-long weapon that seemed to have been torn from the heart of a dead star. Its hull was a chaotic lattice of spines and weapon emplacements, glowing with a sickly purple energy that seemed to warp the space around it. It was a vessel built for one purpose, destruction. More terrifying, however, were the biosignatures detected within. They were faint, corrupted, and SCR. Eeming with a psychic agony that bled through the nth-dimensional sensors and into the minds of the psionically attuned delegates. The Ravagers, Matriarch Ilthani whispered, her voice trembling. The name was a curse, a ghost story told to frighten young spawnlings. The Ravagers were a legend, a nomadic fleet of corsairs and butchers who were thought to have been eradicated centuries ago in the scouring of the Outer Rim. They did not conquer, they consumed. They did not enslave, they annihilated, taking technology, resources, and biological matter before leaving dead worlds in their wake. For them to reappear now, and to be heading for Earth, was a coincidence too monstrous to be believed. Vorlag rose from his throne, the psychoreactive metal screaming as it contorted to match his sudden, violent resolve. The debate is over. The humans' silence is now irrelevant. They are the potential spark, and the Ravagers are the accelerant. We will not allow the fire to be lit. I am mobilizing the Ascendancy's third fleet. We will intercept this ghost ship before it can reach the Sol system's outer marker. We will meet them in the Uit cloud of that system, and we will erase this echo of a forgotten age from existence. His gaze swept the chamber, daring anyone to challenge him. The crimson light of war now dominated the room entirely. The speaker for the Eldridge Compact, ever the voice of dispassionate reason, added its own chilling codicil. Agreed, and we must consider the secondary protocol. If the fleet fails, if the Ravager ship breaks our line, we must be prepared to enact the Sanctus Protocol. We will sterilize the Sol system ourselves. It is a regrettable but necessary price to pay to prevent the Ravagers from gaining a foothold and a potential slave army in this quadrant. The finality of the speaker's statement settled over the conclave like a shroud. To save the galaxy from the humans, they had debated their fate. Now, to save the galaxy from the Ravagers, they were debating the humans' utter annihilation. No one spoke of warning them. No one spoke of aiding them. They were a variable, a piece on a cosmic board, and they were about to be swept aside by forces they could not possibly comprehend. As Vorlag's commands began to filter out from the chamber, dispatching a fleet of warships that could crack continents, the delegates watched the holographic display. They saw the jagged, hateful silhouette of the Ravager vessel moving implacably through the void, a harbinger of death. And beyond it, still silent, still wrapped in its blanket of radio waves and chaotic energy, lay the small, blue world, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over it, and the even greater storm that was deciding its fate from afar. The Cathar believed they were making a choice based on logic and necessity, a hard decision for the greater good. They had no way of knowing that their entire understanding of the species called humanity was a flawed, incomplete, and dangerously underestimated projection. They saw a primitive world in need of protection or purification. They did not see the silent sentinel that had been watching the darkness for a very, very long time. The Vexian fleet was a sight of terrible grandeur, a manifestation of ordered power. It moved through the void not as a collection of individual ships, but as a single unified weapon. Their hulls were geometric certainties, all sharp angles and flat, non-reflective surfaces designed to minimize sensor profiles and maximize weapon coverage. They exited hyperspace at the designated intercept point, a desolate, empty region of the Sol system's outer cloud, with the silent precision of a surgeon's scalpel. They arranged themselves into a classic containment formation, a concave wall of warships with the flagship, the Ascendant Will, at its center. Inside the command deck of the Ascendant Will, High Counselor Vorlag stood before a panoramic observation window that was, in reality, a real-time data projection of the space around them. The light on the bridge was a cold, efficient white, the air still and recycled, carrying the faint scent of ozone from the humming energy conduits. "Status reports," Vorlag commanded, his voice a low rumble that cut through the quiet efficiency of the bridge crew. A subcommander, his Vexian carapace polished to a mirror sheen, responded without turning from his console. "All vessels report green. Formation is stable. Long-range sensors have confirmed the target's trajectory. It will arrive at our position in precisely 27 standard units. It has not altered its course or speed. It shows no sign of having detected us." Vorlag's mandibles twitched in a gesture of grim satisfaction. Arrogant fools, they believe themselves ghosts unopposed. They will find this sector is haunted by more than just legends. He watched the tactical display, a three-dimensional representation of the battlefield where the icons of his fleet met a perfect, unbreachable barrier. Weapon systems to full power. Target their primary drive system first. We will cripple them, then we will dissect them piece by piece. I want their databases, their logs. I want to know how this remnant survived the scouring and what has drawn them here. The units of time bled into one another, each one stretching the tension on the bridge to a higher pitch. The Vexian crew were professionals, warriors of a species that had forged an empire through disciplined warfare. They did not show fear, but the focused silence was its own form of reverence for the violence to come. Then it appeared, not as a sudden flash of light, but as a tear in the fabric of space itself. The Ravager vessel emerged from its faster-than-light travel with a brutal disregard for physics, the space around it shimmering and distorting as if in pain. It was even more monstrous up close. The hull was not merely armored. It was scarred, pitted, and covered in what looked like the fused wreckage of other, lesser ships, trophies of past massacres. The sickly purple energy that pulsed from its weapon ports was a visible aura of malice. "Target is in range," the subcommander announced, his voice tight. "It is not slowing down." Vorlag stared at the behemoth. It was larger than his flagship, a single vessel that outweighed a third of his fleet. Its design was an insult to engineering, a testament to brute force over elegance. "Fire!" he commanded. The Vexian fleet unleashed a storm of coherent energy. Lances of pure, white-hot plasma and beams of focused gravitational distortion crossed the void in an instant. The opening salvo was a perfectly coordinated attack designed to overwhelm any shield system and tear through any known armor. The light from the impacts was blinding, a new star igniting and dying in the dark. For a moment, the Ravager ship was completely engulfed in a sun-fire of Vexian power. But as the energy dissipated, a collective gasp, quickly suppressed, went through the bridge of the ascendant will. The Ravager ship was unharmed. The energy had splashed against its hull and vanished, absorbed by some unknown form of energy-dampening field. The jagged ship continued its inexorable advance, the purple glow of its weapon ports intensifying. Before the Vexians could fire a second salvo, the Ravager responded. It did not fire beams or projectiles. It unleashed a wave of something else. A ripple in spacetime, a tide of raw, chaotic energy that washed over the Vexian formation. On the bridge of the Ascendant Will, alarms screamed. Consoles sparked and died. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and the lights flickered, plunging the bridge into a terrifying strobe of light and shadow. "Report!" Vorlag roared, gripping his command throne to stay upright. "Shields are failing," a crew member shouted. "The energy wave isn't kinetic, it's entropic. It's aging our systems, causing catastrophic decay." Another voice cried out in panic. "We've lost the starboard wing. Ships are reporting critical power failures across the fleet. Their systems are turning to dust." Vorlag watched in horror as the perfect icons of his fleet on the tactical display began to blink out, one by one. The Ravager ship was not fighting them. It was unmaking them. Their advanced technology, their disciplined tactics, it was all rendered useless against an enemy that attacked the very laws of physics that their ships relied upon. He saw one of his cruisers, a vessel that had survived the siege of Orion's gate, simply fall apart, its hull crystallizing and crumbling into a cloud of inert debris. The Ravager ship, its point made, finally unleashed its conventional weapons. Torrents of purple energy, crackling with uncontrolled power, slammed into the crippled Vexian ships, blowing them apart in silent, brutal explosions. The battle was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The Ascendant Will shuddered as a glancing blow from one of the energy streams tore through its aft sections. "High Counselor," the subcommander said, his voice eerily calm in the midst of the chaos, his face illuminated by the fire from his exploding console. "We cannot stop it. Our weapons are ineffective. Our defenses are obsolete. We have failed." Vorlag's mind, a mind trained for strategy and the cold calculus of war, was blank. He had never conceived of such a defeat. It was not just a loss. It was an invalidation. His fleet, the pride of the Ascendancy, had been swatted aside like insignificant insects. He watched the Ravager ship, now gliding through the expanding debris field of his annihilated fleet, and felt a cold, primal fear he had not experienced since he was a frightened spawnling. The Ravager ship did not even pause to savor its victory. It simply continued on its course, a course that led directly to the third planet of the Sol system, Earth. As the last of his functioning sensors died, Vorlag sent a single desperate message. "CK to the Conclave." It was not a report. It was a warning, a scream of utter terror and disbelief that echoed across the subspace channels. The ghost from the past was not a ghost. It was a god of destruction, and it was heading for a world of primitives who had no idea that their sky was about to fall. The carefully laid plans of the Cathar, their debates, their protocols, had all turned to ash in the face of a reality they had not prepared for. They had sent a fleet to contain a potential problem, and in doing so had merely confirmed the existence of a truly existential threat. A threat that was now less than an hour away from a silent, unsuspecting Earth. The final, desperate warning from the Ascendant will arrived at the Grand Conclave chamber like a physical blow. The spire of light at the chamber's center turned a stark, terrifying black, a color that signified a catastrophic military defeat and the loss of a high counselor. The data packet, corrupted and fragmented, played out on the holographic displays, a chaotic montage of dying ships, screaming alarms, and the final, horrifying image of the unharmed Ravager vessel gliding through the wreckage. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than any that had come before. It was the silence of absolute shock. The Vexian Third Fleet, a force that had pacified entire rebellions, had been annihilated in mere moments. The light in the chamber became a swirling vortex of panicked colors. Matriarch Ilthani's bioluminescent membranes were a pale, sickly white, her form trembling. Even the speaker for the Eldridge Compact, a being of pure, collective thought, projected a visible aura of disturbance, a shimmering distortion in the air around its stone throne. The debate was no longer about what to do with humanity. The debate was about survival. The Sanctus Protocol, the sterilization of the Sol system, was now their only logical course of action. It was a horrific choice, but the Ravager vessel had proven itself to be a threat of an entirely new magnitude. Allowing it to claim a habitable world, its resources, and its population for its own malevolent purposes was unthinkable. There is no other option, the speaker's voice intoned, the chorus of thoughts within it strained, dissonant. The protocol must be enacted. We will target the star itself. A supernova induction. It will be clean. The Ravager vessel will be consumed along with the entire system, a tragic but necessary sacrifice. Even as the order was being formulated, a junior technician, a young Cygnian whose job was simply to monitor the deep space sensor nets, let out a startled chime of disbelief. High Counselors, forgive the intrusion, but I am detecting something impossible. All attention snapped to the technician's alcove. Report, Matriarch Ilthani commanded, her voice thin. The Sol system, the third planet, Earth, the technician stammered, its slender fingers flying across its console. It is broadcasting a powerful, focused transmission on all frequencies, including nth-dimensional subspace. A new holographic display bloomed in the center of the chamber. It showed the blue and white marble of Earth, serene and beautiful. But as they watched, something new resolved into view. From the planet's dark side, a vessel was rising. It was not large, barely the size of a Vexian cruiser, but its design was unlike anything the Cathar had ever seen. It was a seamless, featureless ovoid of a material that seemed to drink the light of the stars, a perfect, absolute black. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no sensor arrays. It was a drop of pure night against the tapestry of space, and it was moving with a silent, impossible grace, accelerating towards the incoming Ravager ship at a velocity that should have torn it apart. Then the transmission from Earth resolved. It was not a plea for help. It was not a cry of fear. It was a calm, clear voice, speaking a language that was alien to them, yet the universal translators in the chamber rendered it instantly. The voice was male, low, and imbued with an incredible, unshakable sense of calm. This is the United Nations Celestial Defense Platform Vigilance, the voice said, the words echoing in the stunned silence of the conclave. To the unidentified vessel approaching our system, you have been designated a hostile entity under the terms of the outer planet's defense mandate. Your trajectory and energy signature are indicative of aggressive intent. You are ordered to power down your weapon systems and come to a complete stop. You will be boarded and inspected. Failure to comply will be met with terminal force. You have 1 minute to respond. The audacity of the statement was so profound that for a moment, the counselors could only stare in stunned disbelief. A single, small ship from a pre-interstellar species was issuing an ultimatum to the monstrosity that had just erased one of the Conclave's most powerful fleets. It was madness, it was suicide. Vorlag, presumed dead, suddenly appeared on a secondary channel, his voice a ragged, breathless whisper from the ruined bridge of his flagship, which was now nothing more than a drifting tomb. "Did you see it? Did you hear it?" he rasped, his multifaceted eyes wide with a new, different kind of fear. They knew. They were waiting. On the main display, the Ravager ship, predictably, did not respond. It continued its advance, its purple energy ports glowing brighter, preparing to swat this insignificant gnat out of its path. The 60 seconds elapsed in what felt like an eternity. The calm human voice returned. Your time has expired, your noncompliance is registered, executing defensive protocols. The black, ovoid ship, the Vigilance, did something that defied all known principles of physics and warfare. It did not fire a laser. It did not launch a missile. The space between the human ship and the Ravager vessel simply folded. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, the two ships, separated by millions of kilometers, occupied the same coordinate in spacetime. There was no explosion, no flash of light. There was only a brief, silent flicker as if a star had blinked. And then, where the kilometers-long Ravager warship had been, there was nothing. Not wreckage, not debris, not even a particle of dust. It was simply gone, vanished from existence as if it had never been. The Grand Conclave chamber was utterly, completely silent. The flowing light of the room had frozen into a solid, crystalline pattern of pure, unadulterated shock. The counselors, beings of immense power and ancient wisdom, stared at the display, their minds struggling to process what their senses had just told them. They had witnessed a weapon that did not destroy. It erased. It removed an object from reality itself. The black, ovoid ship, its work done, turned with the same silent grace and began to move back towards its home planet. The transmission channel opened one last time. It was a different voice now, female, equally calm, but with a note of what could almost be described as weary patience. To the observers of the Cathar Conclave, the voice said, addressing them directly and shattering their millennia-long illusion of observational invisibility. We are aware of your presence as we have been for the last 112 of our years. Your non-interference was noted and for a time appreciated. The entity you just witnessed was a remnant of the Horusian scourge, a biomechanical plague that we had believed to be extinct. We have now updated our threat assessment. We cordially invite you to send a diplomatic envoy to our system to discuss the new reality of the galactic situation. Please ensure your representatives are unarmed and prepared for a frank and open dialogue. We have much to discuss. Vigilance out. The transmission ended. The holographic display showed the small, black ship descending back into the atmosphere of Earth, disappearing from view. The blue planet continued to spin, serene, silent once more, but its silence was no longer a mystery. It was not the silence of ignorance or contentment. It was the silence of a guardian, a sentinel. A species that had been quietly policing its own backyard, dealing with cosmic horrors that the mighty Cathar Conclave had believed to be mere legends, and all without ever announcing its presence. They hadn't been hiding from the galaxy. They had been protecting it. Matriarch Ilthani slowly lowered her head, her pearlescent throne glowing with a soft, gentle light of pure, unadulterated awe. Vorlag's proposal of a managed uplift seemed like the ravings of a madman now. The speaker's talk of sterilization was a galactic blasphemy. They had not been observing a primitive species. They had been ants debating the fate of a sleeping giant, completely unaware that the giant had been awake the entire time, patiently listening to their foolish, arrogant whispers. The journey to Earth was undertaken with a level of trepidation the Cathar had not felt since their own first forays into interstellar space. Matriarch Ilthani herself led the diplomatic mission, accompanied by a retinue of the Conclave's most seasoned linguists, philosophers, and xenosociologists. The speaker for the Eldridge Compact also dispatched a remote psionic projection, a non-physical observer to witness the proceedings. They traveled not in a warship, but in a small diplomatic courier, its hull gleaming and its weapon ports sealed, as requested. As they approached the third planet, they were not met by an escort of black, ovoid ships, but by a simple, automated guidance beacon that led them into a high, stable orbit. A human voice, the same calm female from the final transmission, gave them precise coordinates for a landing zone in a region of the planet they had identified from their observations as a vast, arid desert. The landing was seamless, as the courier's ramp lowered. The delegates were met not by a military honor guard or robed officials, but by a single human figure standing alone on the red, sun-baked earth. The figure was dressed in a simple, gray, form-fitting environmental suit, its face obscured by a polarized helmet. The air outside was thin but breathable for the Cathar delegates, and the sun was a warm, yellow-white star in a sky of breathtaking blue. The silence of the desert was vast and peaceful. "Matriarch Ilthani," the human said, her voice clear through their suit communicators. The Cathar delegation started. The human had not only identified their leader by name, but had pronounced the complex Signian syllables perfectly. "I am Envoy Alara. On behalf of a united humanity, welcome to Earth. We thank you for accepting our invitation. Matriarch Ilthani glided down the ramp, her form a stark, beautiful contrast to the rugged landscape. She inclined her head in a gesture of formal respect. Envoy Alara, we are honored and humbled. Your actions against the Ravager vessel, they have reshaped our understanding of the Galactic Order. The human Alara nodded slowly. The Ravagers, as you call them, are a known threat. We have contained them before. This one was an anomaly, more powerful than the others we have encountered. It confirms a theory we have long held. She gestured towards a low, unassuming structure that rose from the desert floor a short distance away, its lines clean and minimalist, blending almost perfectly with the surrounding rock formations. Please, let us speak inside. The sun here can be unforgiving. The interior of the structure was as surprising as the exterior. It was not a military bunker or a grand hall of state. It was a calm, quiet space, filled with soft, indirect light. The walls were covered in living green plants, and the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers. In the center of the main chamber was a simple, round table made of a dark, polished wood, surrounded by chairs of various shapes and sizes, clearly designed to accommodate different alien physiologies. It was a gesture of consideration so profound, and so unexpected that it left the delegates momentarily speechless. You have been preparing for us, Ilthani stated, her voice soft with wonder. We have been preparing for contact, Alara corrected gently as she removed her helmet. Her face was unremarkable by galactic standards. No cranial ridges, no multifaceted eyes, no bioluminescent markings. Her features were soft, her skin a warm brown, her eyes a dark, intelligent shade that seemed to hold a deep, ancient sadness. We believe that any species capable of reaching the stars is worthy of dialogue and respect. We had hoped our first contact would be under more peaceful circumstances. The delegates took their seats. The speaker's psionic projection shimmered into existence, a faint, humanoid outline of pure thought. Your capabilities, the speaker's voice echoed in their minds, foregoing the translator. The weapon you used, it defies our understanding of physics. How is it possible? Alara looked towards the psionic projection, her gaze direct and unflinching, as if she were looking at a physical being. It is not a weapon, not in the way you understand it. We do not weaponize energy or matter. We weaponize concepts, mathematics. The ship you call the Vigilance did not fire anything. It presented the Ravager vessel with a new law of physics, a localized, temporary axiom in which its existence was a mathematical impossibility. It was not destroyed. It was solved. It was removed from the equation. The philosophical weight of her statement was staggering. The Cathar fought wars with force. The humans, it seemed, fought them with logic. They did not break ships. They broke the rules of reality itself. And your silence? Ilthani asked, her voice filled with the question that had plagued the conclave for decades. You knew we were watching. Why did you not speak? Why hide such advancement? Alara's expression became somber. She gestured to the walls, and they dissolved, not into screens, but into windows looking out onto a starfield. But it was not the current starfield. It was a deep, archival projection of the galaxy as it was millions of years ago. It was teeming with light, with the signatures of countless spacefaring civilizations. This is the galaxy as it once was, Alara said, her voice a near whisper. A chorus of 1 billion voices. We have found their ghosts, their signals still traveling the void. Their abandoned cities on dead worlds, their shattered megastructures in the orbits of dying stars. The galaxy was once loud, Matriarch. Now it is quiet. We wanted to know why. She changed the projection. It now showed a single, ominous energy signature, a wave of something dark and subtle, sweeping across a quadrant of the galaxy. As it passed, the lights of civilizations winked out, one by one. It was not a wave of destruction, but a wave of silence. We call it the Great Filter, Alara continued. But it is not a natural barrier. It is a signal, an immensely powerful, impossibly ancient and malevolent broadcast. It doesn't destroy civilizations with weapons. It infects them. It turns them against themselves. It preys on ambition, on fear, on the desire for power. It offers shortcuts, forbidden knowledge, technologies that promise mastery over the universe but which inevitably lead to self-annihilation. The Horusian scourge, the Ravagers, they were not its creation, but they were its students. They found a fragment of its code, and it twisted them into what they became. She looked at the Cathar delegates, her dark eyes filled with a profound empathy that was almost painful to witness. We monitored your conclave. We saw your debates. We saw the ambition of Counselor Vorlag, your fear of the unknown, your rigid adherence to an order that you believe keeps you safe. You are a young species, Matriarch, for all your ancient history. You are precisely the kind of civilization the signal preys upon. We remained silent because to announce ourselves would have been to paint a target on your back in hours. The signal learns. It adapts. Had we joined your galactic community, we would have exposed you to it. Its attention would have turned to this quadrant, and you would not have survived. Humanity's silence had not been born of fear, or strategy, or introspection. It had been an act of quarantine, a silent, lonely galactic stewardship. They had isolated themselves not to protect themselves from the galaxy, but to protect the galaxy from a predator it did not even know existed. They were the keepers of a terrible secret, the silent wardens standing guard against a foe that fought with ideas, a foe that could turn the very soul of a species into a weapon against itself. The Ravager ship that appeared, Alara concluded as the star windows faded back into the serene garden walls, was not a random event. Its energy signature was an echo, a harmonic of the great signal. It was drawn here to the edge of our space, not for our planet or our resources. It was a probe, a test. The signal has become aware that something in this sector is resisting its influence. It is beginning to look this way. The grand reveal was complete. Humanity was not the unpredictable variable the Cathar had feared. They were the grim, silent constant. They were the watchers on the wall, the lonely sentinels who had taken upon themselves the burden of a war that had been raging in the cosmic darkness for eons. The Cathar had been debating the fate of children, while the adults in the room were silently holding the tide of oblivion at bay. Matriarch Ilthani felt the entire foundation of her worldview, of the Conclave's purpose, crumble and reform into something new. They had spent millennia building an empire of order to protect against pirates and petty warlords, all while a cancer was spreading through the very heart of galactic life, a cancer they had never even seen. "What is to be done?" she asked, the question not one of a political leader to another, but of a student to a master. Alara's face, for the first time, allowed a flicker of a sad, determined smile. Now the silence ends. The test has come and gone. The signal knows we are here, and we in turn know it is looking. The quarantine is over because the disease is at the door. Now we fight, all of us, together. She extended a hand, an open palm, across the polished wood of the table. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of ages, an invitation to stand against the coming night. The age of silent vigilance is over. A new age must begin, an age of unity. The alliance between humanity and the Cathar conclave was not forged in days or weeks, but in a shared, terrifying understanding that bloomed over the following cycles. Human knowledge, carefully curated and held in reserve for centuries, flowed into the conclave's archives. It was not just technology, the secrets of their conceptual mathematics, their space-time manipulation, their impossibly efficient energy systems, but also their philosophy, their history, their art. The Cathar, in turn, shared their own vast knowledge of galactic history, their understanding of 1,000 different biologies and societies, their mastery of large-scale political organization. It was a true merger of civilizations, born from the sudden, chilling realization of their shared mortality. Counselor Vorlag, having been rescued from the wreckage of his flagship, became one of humanity's most fervent advocates. His military pride had been shattered, but in its place grew a profound and grudging respect. He saw in humanity's quiet, methodical preparation a form of discipline that dwarfed the rigid doctrines of his own people. He spent his time in human military simulators, learning not how to wield better weapons, but how to think differently about the nature of conflict itself. He learned that the greatest victory was not in destroying an enemy, but in making the enemy's purpose irrelevant. The Grand Conclave chamber was transformed. The thrones of psychoreactive metal were supplemented by human interface chairs. The flowing, emotional light was stabilized, replaced by a calm, steady illumination. Human delegates, led by Envoy Alara, now sat among the High Counselors, their calm, logical presence a steadying influence in the often turbulent political currents. The focus of the conclave shifted from internal squabbles and territorial disputes to a single, unifying purpose, preparing the galaxy for the war that was coming. Human ships, the sleek, black ovoids of the celestial defense, began to appear at the borders of conclave space, not as occupiers, but as partners in a joint patrol. They moved in silent concert with the fleets of the Vexian Ascendancy and the Cygnian Veil, creating a shield wall against the encroaching darkness. They taught the Cathar how to see the galaxy as they did, not as a collection of stars and planets, but as a sea of information, of signals and patterns, where the true threats were not fleets of ships, but whispers of malevolent code. One cycle after the formalization of the alliance, Alara stood with Matriarch Ilthani and the psionic projection of the speaker in a place of great significance to humanity. The Arecibo Observatory, a massive, ancient radio telescope nestled in the lush green hills of a terrestrial island. It had been decommissioned for centuries, but was now being retrofitted with a synthesis of human and Cathar technology, its massive dish being recalibrated to listen not just to the stars, but to the silence between them. "It is a beautiful world," Matriarch Ilthani said, her membranes catching the light of the setting sun, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant green of the jungle surrounding them. "To think we considered sanitizing it. The arrogance is a shame I will carry for the rest of my existence." "Arrogance is the child of ignorance, Matriarch," Alara replied, her voice soft. "You did not know. There is no shame in that. The shame would have been in refusing to learn." The speaker's thought voice filled their minds, a query of immense weight. "The Great Signal, you have studied it for so long. Have you learned anything of its origin, its purpose? Is it a being, a machine, a natural phenomenon?" Alara's gaze turned upwards, towards the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "We believe it is an echo, a weapon left over from a war that was fought before our galaxy had even fully formed, a war between architects." She led them to the heart of the observatory's control center. In the middle of the room, a holographic projector swirled to life. It did not show a star chart, but a complex, multi-dimensional waveform, a shimmering, intricate pattern of breathtaking complexity. "This is the source of the Great Signal," Alara explained. "Or rather, this is the carrier wave. The signal itself is just the payload, the malicious code, but the wave that carries it, that is something else entirely. It is ancient. It predates any known matter in the universe. We have spent centuries trying to decode it, to understand its structure. We believed it was a natural phenomenon, a cosmic background radiation of some kind that a malevolent intelligence had simply hijacked for its own purposes." She manipulated the controls, and the waveform on the display began to slow, to stretch, its intricate patterns resolving into something more defined. It was still impossibly complex, but for the first time the Cathar delegates could see it. Buried deep within the chaotic static, there was structure, repetition, a pattern. "2 of our weeks ago," Alara said, her voice dropping to a whisper filled with awe and terror, "one of our deep learning quantum AIs, cross-referencing our data with the Eldridge Compact's stellar cartography archives, finally broke the primary encryption layer. It is not random. It is not a natural wave. It is a message. And the Great Signal, the weapon that has been silencing the galaxy for billions of years, is only a tiny, insignificant fraction of the message's content. A corrupted fragment, a piece of viral code that has attached itself to the main broadcast, like a disease." She zoomed in on the holographic display, isolating a single, clean segment of the underlying, uncorrupted signal. The pattern resolved into pure, elegant mathematics, a language so universal that it needed no translation. It was a greeting, a map, and a warning. "The broadcast does not originate from within our galaxy," Alara stated, her words landing with the force of a physical blow. "Its point of origin is intergalactic. It is coming from the Andromeda galaxy, and it is not an echo. It is a live transmission. It is a distress call." The implications of this final, staggering revelation washed over them. The Gria T-signal, the ancient, existential enemy they were preparing to fight, was just a piece of cosmic noise clinging to a much larger, much more important transmission. They had been preparing for a war against a ghost, a planetary plague, when the true context was infinitely larger. "A distress call," Matriarch Ilthani breathed. "From whom? And what could be so terrible that it would require a broadcast of such power that it could cross the intergalactic void for eons?" Alara's face was grim, etched with the weight of this new, terrifying knowledge. "The message is fragmented, but it speaks of a threat not to a civilization or a galaxy, but to reality itself. It calls this threat the erosion, a force that is not consuming universes but unwriting them, erasing the laws of physics that allow them to exist. The message from Andromeda is not just a warning, it is a plea for allies. A call for any surviving intelligence in any galaxy to help them in a war against the encroaching silence of non-existence." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Humanity had thought they were the silent guardians of their galaxy. They now knew they were simply one of countless species, across countless galaxies, just beginning to wake up to the true nature of the cosmos. Their lonely vigil was over, but it was to be replaced by a burden of truly unimaginable scale. They had thought they had found the ultimate enemy, only to discover it was merely a symptom of a far greater sickness. The challenge was not to save their world or their galaxy. The challenge was to answer a call sent millions of years ago from a galaxy millions of light years away to join a battle for the preservation of all that is and all that could ever be. The sky above them, filled with the light of distant suns, suddenly seemed not like a grand, empty space, but like a frontier to a war beyond all comprehension. And humanity, the quiet, underestimated species from a small blue world, stood ready with their new allies to face it. The real story was only just beginning.